Hi everyone, this is AJ again. So today's topic is an interesting one. It's something we've been getting for a long, long time, and almost everyone has asked us this question. And this is something even the mainstream media likes to compare it with. I'm sure you probably already guessed it in your head. Yes, it's going to be about Bitcoin versus gold. Which one is better? Or even if that comparison is a valid one, should we even compare this? And you must have heard a lot of media outlets talking about Bitcoin is the new standard, Bitcoin is the digital gold, even though the gold has been digitalized, we have gold ETFs and so on. So without further ado, I think, Varun, I would like to start with a question. In this debate of Bitcoin versus gold, I think I already know your answer. The answer is that Bitcoin wins, but the question is why?
Yes, uh, that's a very interesting question. Bitcoin wins because it's more accessible. I mean, it's 24 hours, 365 days a year. It's borderless, right? Bitcoin is deflationary. Yes, we know gold is limited, that there is a 2% inflation when it comes to supply of gold, but Bitcoin is deflationary. It's got a fixed cap. And it's easier to store and transport. It can be used for payments cross-border, what we've discussed in our earlier episodes as well. And Bitcoin is transparent. It can be audited. It has a great growth potential, which we've been seeing. It's a future proof, and everybody's anticipating that eventually all countries are going to sell their gold reserves and move that money to Bitcoin because Bitcoin is digital gold.
Okay. So I think these are like the highlights of why Bitcoin wins, which is great. I think let's dive into each and every point I think that you made in regards to why Bitcoin wins. And let's start with the first one, which is about Bitcoin being accessible. Can you define that and can you explain that in a bit more detail for our audience?
Sure. Let's say now we are recording this video on a Sunday. Can you sell your gold at this hour, whichever country you are in at the moment? You cannot, right?
No.
But I can sell my Bitcoin 24 hours. I just need a laptop, I need a smartphone, and I can do that. So
Mm.
this is why it is more accessible, and it's not just because it's a weekend or there's a stat holiday. Sometimes, let's say there is a war happening, which is in and around your country, and nowadays we keep seeing that, which is happening. Can you sell? Can you panic and can you sell any of your assets at 11 o'clock on a Saturday? We can't. So I guess that is the flexibility and that is the kind of comfort level Bitcoins gives you in day-to-day life. So that's why I
Right.
say that Bitcoin is accessible.
I see. So it's accessible as in any time of the day, any day of the week, any week of the month, any month of the year. You can buy or you can sell as much as you like, depending on your budget. Again, this is not financial advice. Please do your own research. Okay, now that disclaimer is out of the way, let's get into the next one. I think another topic that you touched on in regards to why Bitcoin wins, when we talked about Bitcoin versus gold, is gold has a lot of geopolitics involved. It is kind of, hey, this country has so much reserves and this country has, or the other country has so much reserves. But Bitcoin is borderless. So before you get into the details of that point, I have a question for you already, which is Bitcoin mining is at all-time high and is very competitive, and there's, countries competing with mining Bitcoin now. Isn't that the same to what gold is geopolitically?
Yes, but then if you remember that going back to in 70s, when the dollar was depegged from the gold standard, because of the fact that the countries were not able to trust US that what they claim they actually hold that kind of gold, right? And with gold is like you can get gold on a comet or moon, sun. I know it's difficult to extract from the sun, but at least, there are, I would say, opportunities where you can get more supply of gold. But when it comes to Bitcoin, we know it's going to be 21 million. We know the halving cycle, which is every 4 years. We know that 90% of the Bitcoin has already been mined. And by the time the last Bitcoin, which is a few Satoshi, which are going to be mined, is going to be in the year 2140, when none of us is going to be alive, but at least we know what the supply is. With gold, as the value keeps going up, countries are able to mine more gold, they get more gold, and you also have to trust, which is one of the reasons why the dollar was depegged from the gold. So going back to again, it's a never-ending cycle. Yes, gold worked, but not in the digital era.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, and so most of the countries are eventually going to be selling their gold and moving to.
I see. That's a very big statement and a big assumption at this stage. But yeah, time will tell. I'm not doubting that at all. All I'm saying is that's a very big statement because at the moment, all you hear in the news and you read in the news is everyone trying to accumulate as much gold as you can. As you know, China, for example, has been accumulating a lot of gold. So is India. India just expatriated their gold from UK. I'm sure you must have read that in the news. So things like that. Yeah, I think yeah, there is space for Bitcoin, there is space for gold, and I like to believe there's space for both because the traditional is gold is such an old asset, assets that our fathers and forefathers and grandparents and great grandparents have been using it as a store of value, and I think yes, Bitcoin is the new digital gold because of its scarcity, which is less or limited number of Bitcoin that will ever be. So I do see definitely that as a big store of value or a great piece of store of value. But yeah, I do believe there is a space for both gold and Bitcoin. Is there anything you want to talk about on that point?
It's difficult to store gold, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's not portable. You can't move from the country you live in to any, like, let's say, to any other country you want to move to. And there are a lot of restrictions and there are a lot of hiccups, like when you have to take physical gold with you. I agree that somebody should have a little bit of gold, and especially, the culture we are from, people use gold in the form of jewelry. But as far as bricks, I just want to point out one point here that the reason they were doing that is because they were in the process of introducing their own currency because they no longer use US dollar for international trade.
Hmm.
Recently, you may have seen a tweet by Donald Trump where he mentioned that if BRICS are going to be using their own currency and they're not going to be using US dollar, then they would get 100% tariff on anything which is being imported by the US. So what is going to happen is, and the next day there was an interview by Putin, who basically head of Russia, and he mentioned that nobody can ban Bitcoin, and eventually Bitcoin is going to be used for international trade.
Биткоин кто может запретить? Никто. А использование других электронных средств расчета кто может запретить? Никто, потому что это новые технологии. И чего бы ни было, чего бы ни происходило с долларом, эти инструменты так или иначе будут развиваться, потому что все будут стремиться к тому, чтобы снижать издержки и повышать надежность.
So I feel that this is, I'm not saying don't trust what the media is talking about, but we all know that there is more to that and not just what they say. So eventually, what is going to happen is because Bitcoin can be a common currency between the international trade, which is what is going to happen. Initially, I did mention in my last episode where I mentioned that US dollar will be backed by Bitcoin, but that would happen in the form of not CBDCs, but that will happen in the form of stable coins. So if you see
Hmm.
USDT or USDC, there are a lot of, especially in a lot of developing countries where they cannot use their own fiat currency. There are a lot of people actually using stable coins as well, and which is about 150 $200 billion kind of a market cap. So nobody can ignore stablecoins. So they're not going to be called CBDCs, which are called central bank digital currencies. They're going to be called stablecoins as far as US, and that is privatized. So it's nothing to do with the government. So, but the issue here is that you are correlating. So the price of Bitcoin is going to keep going up. It is eventually going to cross the gold market cap. Coming back to the gold topic, is because it is Bitcoin being a finite asset, which is correlated to a fiat currency where, okay, they physically print money, but once they have stable coins, they'll be digitally minting money. But it's one of the same thing. The supply
Hmm.
is infinite. So eventually all the assets are going to be keep increasing in the value. And which is what is going to happen to Bitcoin because Bitcoin is, you don't need to trust, you can verify, where we've been talking about it because it's a code, right? It's open source, decentralized. So that's the background story, and I thought just wanted to point that out.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. I actually wanted to ask you on what is the difference between a stable coin and a CBDC?
So CBDC is something what you see in China. It's a digital yuan, where it is a programmable money which can be programmed. And imagine if your money has an expiry date, or imagine your money, decides what you can buy or what you can't buy. and that is being controlled, that is completely centralized. And that has already been introduced in China alongside the digital IDs, right?
Hmm.
Where somebody who doesn't have that social security kind of a rating, they are not able to use public transport. Or let's say there is any kind of protest happening in one particular area, and they can basically track you completely. And like what happened in Canada, where the accounts were frozen, the truckers who were protesting, what happened? And imagine China is also in the past what they done with Hong Kong. They could figure out who was part of the protest and who wasn't. So I guess with CBDCs, this is going to be the new norm. So this is why Bitcoin, it's open source. Yes, you can see the wallet, you can see all the transactions, but you cannot put an identity to any transactions. So that is the beauty about Bitcoin.
Yeah, you know somebody's doing it, but you don't know who is doing it, right?
Yeah, and nobody can control it, right? It's up to your discretion if you want to do. It's a peer to peer. So if I am providing you my labor hours, or if I'm providing you any kind of services, you are paying me in Bitcoin. There is no third party who's going to be controlling that transaction or who's going to be, overlooking whether the transaction will go through or not. So we get the power in our hands.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. That was a very detailed answer. Thank you for that. So firstly, let's talk about Bitcoin as a method of payment or as a mode of payment. I mean, Bitcoin for most people that we know consider it as digital gold, which is essentially a store of value, which means I want to invest, I want to keep my money safe. I would put money in gold. So that way, knowing that it's a rare commodity, the price will go up. And if I need emergency funds, I can liquidate some gold and I can, get some fiat currency and I can pay whatever or whoever I need to. Do you foresee Bitcoin actually becoming a currency between nations, trading or, buying, let's say, oil or um, wheat, coffee, etc., and paying for those goods and services in Bitcoin?
Absolutely. For international trade, this is definitely is going to happen, and we saw that when Putin gave an interview recently. And this is why BRICS has gone back, and now they're basically mining Bitcoin with government resources, right? So we know that yes, countries are going to be using Bitcoin as for international trade. Number one, number two, as far as normal people, you and me. See, Bitcoin is a digital currency. So ideally it's peer to peer, right? Like I said, if I have to trade my hours, I will give you my hours and you will pay me in Bitcoin, where there is no third party involved, all of that. But having said that, Bitcoin, if it is not used for payment, then it's only used as store of value, then it completely dilutes the entire case for Bitcoin, right? Because the idea was to have a peer to peer where there are no third party involved. Yes, it becomes the store of value, but where let's say now just because we are sitting in first world countries, we have an upper hand of earning, dollars or pounds or whatever. And what about people who are sitting in developing countries? So Bitcoin solves that as well. So this is why there will be a point where people will no longer take fiat currencies in exchange to Bitcoin. And we know that there are only less than 2.2 million Bitcoins available on the exchanges. And we also know that there are roughly about 400 or 450 Bitcoin being mined every day. And currently, the demand, what we see with ETFs and with countries buying and all of that, only the US is buying 10 times what Bitcoin is available on daily basis. So eventually, all exchanges are going to run dry. And so exchanging Bitcoin is going to be the new norm.
Okay. So if we are using Bitcoin as a currency, I'm just trying to understand why would I spend my Bitcoin when I know it's just going to go up in value? Like, let's say I buy something from you today and you tell me, AJ, this is 0.01 in Bitcoin, right? That 0.01 today, let's say, is $100,000, for example. In 5 years' time, that 0.01 is going to become $500,000. That's what everybody is saying, right? So why will I spend today 0.01 Bitcoin to pay you 100,000 in fiat equivalent when I know that the value of this 0.01 is going to go up to $500,000 in 5 years?
See, you can say that is because you are not in a country where your fiat currency is struggling to such a point that you go out for grocery shopping and by the end of it, the price is going to fluctuate. You're not in a country where every hour inflation is going up. So there they have no other option but to use Bitcoin in the form of payment. How do you safeguard yourself? How do you make sure that your purchasing power is not being lost? So there they're going to be using more of Bitcoin in the form of Lightning Network, when as part of peer-to-peer transactions. But where in the developed world, where fiat currency, okay, there is inflation 10-12% a year, where it takes time. It's not as crazy as compared to Lebanon or Zimbabwe or Argentina or Brazil and all of that, where nobody can use fiat currency. Right, we've spoken about that, where toilet paper has more value than their fiat currency. So they don't have any option. What do you do?
Mm,
Imagine you're going out with your wife, you're going for a lunch, and by the time your lunch is over, you're not sure what the bill is going to be.
mm.
And we've seen that it happened in Venezuela recently. And this is why stable coins are going up, because people are using US dollars. People who are
Okay.
not aware, or people who are not completely orange pilled that Bitcoin is a way forward, they're using stable coins
Okay.
because they feel that it's, to answer your question, because they feel that it's too volatile. So there are people who don't want to use it because it can also go other way around. The price of we know that 30% correction is quite normal in a bull market. So why would somebody wants to lose 30%? There are chances that it can happen. So
Mm,
there people are going to be using stablecoin.
mm.
Eventually, Bitcoin will be considered more of it, I would say, store of value, and it's a generational wealth where you can give it to your kids and you don't have to worry about whether they'll be paying capital gains tax, or because there is no maintenance fee attached to it once your Bitcoin is in a cold wallet.
Okay, that's an interesting take on Bitcoin versus gold. Why? Any other thoughts on why do you think Bitcoin wins over gold?
From my personal experience, I can tell you that gold has got a lot of restrictions, but I'm not saying don't have gold. Yes, have a certain amount of gold. And we spoke about, coming from a culture where people wear jewelry. So that can be used as gold. And so that easily you can move from one country to the other. But other than that, I would say that Bitcoin is the way forward, and it's is the future. That's the best way you can secure your wealth.
Great, great. Thank you very much, Varun. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. I hope you found this session really helpful, debating on the fact Bitcoin versus gold and then who wins or Bitcoin wins in our view. Please also don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.